Hi guys, today's video we'll be looking at India under the Delhi Sultanate. So in the previous lecture we discussed about what were the developments or how was the administration under the Delhi Sultanate, how they came to India. All these aspects were discussed in the previous lecture. So I'll provide you with the link in the I button at the top. Okay, you can go through it before going to this lecture. And what we are going to learn through this chapter is administration under the Delhi Sultanate, economic condition under the Delhi Sultanate, then social life under the Delhi Sultanate, art and architecture of the Delhi Sultanate, and literary development. Okay, all these aspects. Basically, what was actually happening inside the Delhi Sultanate, we are going to see. Administration. The establishment and expansion of Delhi Sultanate led to the evolution of powerful and efficient administrative system. Okay, it was a really good administrative system from the side of the Delhi Sultanate. At the zenith, the authority of Delhi Sultan had extended as far south as Madurai. We have seen it in the previous video. The Tughlaq dynasty, for example, it had reached till the south, till almost till the south, or we can say it didn't conquer Madurai. Okay, till that extent, the Delhi Sultanate was there. Although the Delhi Sultanate had disintegrated, their administrative system had a powerful impact on the Indian provincial kingdoms. See, and even the Mughals adopted the administrative systems, especially the administrative system led by Balban, by Firoz Shah, by Tughlaq. All these things were adopted. Okay, and also by Khilji. Khilji's land reforms were very important in the Mughal era. Okay, Delhi Sultanate was an Islamic state. Okay, so they gave considerable attention to the Caliph. They included the name of Caliph in khutbah or the prayer. Okay, and in their coins also the name of Caliph was there. Okay, and Iltutmish, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and Firoz Tughlaq, they got manzoor or letter of permission from the Caliph. Okay, and the office of Sultan was the most important administrative system. He was the ultimate authority of the military. Okay, and we going then legal and military, legal and political activities. Okay, there was no clear law of succession. There was no proper clear law. So, sometimes the son was the next heir or the daughter. In the case of Iltutmish, daughter Razia. So there was no idea. Once the king died, there was no idea whether who is to be anointed as the next king. Okay, and sometimes ulmas, we can say the clergy group of the Islamic teachings. Okay, they played a crucial role in accepting the succession of the throne. However, the military superiority remained the main factor in matters of succession. Okay, now we are looking at the central government. Sultan was assisted by a number of departments. See, from now on, you can take your notes, and because there are a whole lot of departments under the Delhi Sultanate. First one, the most powerful was the Naib. Naib was practically, he enjoyed all the powers of the Sultan and exercised general control over all departments. And after that, we have Wazir. Wazir was the finance minister. He was heading the finance department. Finance department was called Diwani Wazirat. Okay, and going down, we have military department. Military department was called Diwani Aris. It was actually developed by Balban and later expanded by Khilji, Alauddin Khilji. Okay, and he was head, and the Diwani Aris head was called Aris al Mumalik. Okay, he was responsible for recruiting the soldiers and administrating the military department. Okay, but after all, the commander in chief of the army was the Sultan himself. Okay, military department was the first set up by Balban and it was further improved by Alauddin Khilji. This question can be asked. Okay, so that's why I'm mentioning. And we are going down, we have next one. The religious affairs department is called Diwani Razalat and it was headed by Chief Sadar. Okay, it kind of looked after the grants or the money given to the madrasas, mosque, tombs. All these things were controlled by Diwani Rasalat. Okay, and the head of the judicial department was called Chief Qasi, and other judges or qazis were appointed from various parts of the Sultanate. And Sharia was imposed. It was a civil law. And Hindus were governed by their own personal law, and the cases were dispensed at the village panchayats. Okay, criminal law was based on rules and regulations made by the civil law was based on Hindu law and Muslim law, Sharia, and sultans were the final say in the criminal law. Okay, the department of correspondence was there. It was called Diwani Insha. Okay, all the correspondence between the ruler and the officials were dealt with this department. Now going down, we have the local administration. See, it was how the kingdom was divided. It was divided into different levels. Okay, the provinces were called Iktas and initially under the control of the nobles, but governors of the provinces were called Muktis or Walis. Okay, They were to maintain law and order and collect the land revenue. What was their purpose? They had to maintain law and order and had to collect land revenue. The provinces were divided into, now Iktas were divided into Shikhs, and the next division was Paragana. The Shikhs was under the control of Shikdar. That is simple. Shikdar. The Paragana comprising the villages were headed by Amil. Okay. The village contained the basic unit of administration. What was the basic unit of administration in the Delhi Sultanate? It was village. The village headman was known as Makadam or Chowdhury, and the village accountant was called Patwari. Okay. Now going down, we will look at the economy. Economy was mainly land revenue based. Okay. So land was divided into three categories. One was Ikta land. Ikta land. It was land assigned to the officials instead of payment of their services. Instead of cash, land was given. That was called Ikta land. And Khalisa land. Khalisa land is a land under the direct control of Sultan. It included his royal court, royal household, and the revenue collected from there, it was spent for the maintenance of royal court and royal household. Okay, going down, we have Inam land. Inam land was land assigned for or granted to the religious leaders or religious institutions. Peasantry paid one third of their produce as land revenue. Okay, and sometimes even half of the produce. Okay, we have but see, even though the famines were there, they had to pay the taxes, which made their lives miserable. However, sultans like Muhammad bin Tughlaq, we have seen in the previous chapter, Firoz Tughlaq, they took, they gave loans to the farmers, Takavi loans. Okay, and they also encouraged the farmers to cultivate superior crops like wheat instead of barley. Firoz encouraged the growth of horticulture, combining two crops. And Muhammad bin Tughlaq created a separate agricultural department. So Tughlaq created the agricultural department called Diwani Kohi. Okay, and Diwani Kohi agricultural department was created by Tughlaq. Okay, remember that. Now, during the Sultanate period, the process of urbanization gained momentum. Okay, large number of cities came up to be. You should remember Dawlatabad because it was a city that Muhammad bin Tughlaq was trying to make as its capital, but it failed. Okay, the growth of trade and commerce was described by contemporary writers. India exported a large number of commodities to the countries of Persian Gulf and West Asia. Okay, especially we can see the spices and all were exported to the Arab countries. Okay, overseas trade was under the control of, this is not that much important, but just read through it. Overseas trade was under the control of Multanis and Afghan Muslims. Inland trade was under the Gujarat Marwari merchants and Muslim Bora merchants. Okay, construction of roads and their maintenance facilitated the smooth transport and communication. Particularly, the royal roads were kept in good shape. Proper road network was there. And sarais are the rest houses on the highways, were maintained for the convenience of the travelers. Proper trade and commerce was there, and proper network of roads were available in the Delhi Sultanate. Okay, all these things should be noted when we are asking about how was the life under the Delhi Sultanate. Now, cotton, textile, and silk industry flourished in this period. See, you know what they did? They started sericulture, was introduced on a large scale, which made India less dependent on other countries, especially China. And we made our own silk and we imported them. We exported them. Okay. There was extensive use of paper from 14th and 15th centuries. Other crafts like leather making, metal crafts, and carpet weaving flourished due to the increasing demand. Royal Karkhanas, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, he introduced it. It was actually kind of like factories of the old times, and manufactured costly articles made of gold, silver, and goldware. The nobles also aped the lifestyle of sultans and indulged in luxurious life. They were well paid and accumulated enormous wealth. Okay, and now we have the coins. Okay, we have seen how the society was, how the commerce and trade was. Now we will see how the different coins that were introduced. And we can see silver tankas. Silver tankas were there. And this conversion is not much of importance. It has never been asked actually. Gold coins or dinaras became popular during the reign of Alauddin Khilji after his South Indian conquest. Okay, and copper coins were less in number and dateless. Muhammad bin Tughlaq had not only experimented token currency but also issued several types of gold and silver coins. Okay, they were minted on 8 different places, and at least 25 varieties of gold coins were issued by him. Okay, he experimented on gold and silver as well. Okay, and social life. There was little change in the structure of Hindu society. Hindus, they kind of felt like alienated, we can say, because predominance was given to the Turks, Afghans, and the Indian Muslims to some extent. Okay, Hindu society during that period, the traditional caste system with the Brahmins on the upper strata of the society, it was prevalent. Caste system was there. The subservient position of women continued. Women still didn't come to the main role, and the practice of sati was widely prevalent. Seclusion of women and the wearing of parda became common among the upper class women. Arabs and Turks brought parda system in India, and it became widespread among both women and the women in the upper classes of the North India. Even Hindu women wore parda. During the Sultanate period, the Muslim society remained divided into several ethnic and racial groups. See, this is what there was division. Even though they all were Muslims, there were ethnic divisions. First were Turks, then Iranians, then Afghans, then last was Indian Muslims. They developed exclusively and there were no intermarriages. They were separated between the groups. Hindu converts from the lower caste were also not given equal respects. Muslim nobles occupied high offices and rarely the Hindu nobles were given high position in the government. Okay, Hindus were considered zimmis. Zimmis means protected citizens. Okay, protected citizens, and they were forced to pay a tax called jizya. Jizya was a religious tax, and in the beginning, jizya was collected as part of land tax. Firoz Tughlaq separated it from the land revenue and collected jizya as a separate tax. Sometimes Brahmins were exempted because Brahmins often protested for paying taxes, so they were exempted at sometimes. Okay, now we are looking at the architecture and art during the Sultanate period. Okay, the art and architecture of the Delhi Sultanate period was distinct from the Indian style. Okay, the Turks introduced arches, domes, lofty towers, minarets. Okay, who introduced the Turks? Okay, and decorations using Arabic script. They use the skill. Like now we see the Muslim architecture right now, or the Islamic architecture right now. That was brought down by the Turks when it was implemented during the Delhi Sultanate time. Okay, keep that in mind. They used the skill of the Indian stone cutters. They also added color to their buildings by using marbles, yellow, red, and sandstones. Okay, in the beginning, the converted temples, they converted. This is a sad part. Okay, they converted temples. Okay, for example, the Qazid Islam Mosque near Qutub Minar in Delhi was built by using the materials obtained from destroying many Hindu and Jain temples. See, in the initial stages, when they conquered a place, they needed a place to worship. So they just went and destroyed Hindu temples, and on top of that, they built mosques, or they developed it into mosque. We can see some places where there are sculptures of goddesses, Hindu goddesses inside the Muslim temples, because they were in the olden ages it was a temple, and later it became a mosque. Okay, and the most magnificent building in the 13th century was Qutub Minar, was founded by Aibak and completed by Iltutmish. We discussed in the previous chapter. This 71 meter tower was dedicated to the Sufi saint Qutbuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki. Okay, Qutbuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki. The balconies of the tower projected from the main building, and it was a proof of architectural skills of that period. Okay, and see, there is another important question that can be asked. Alauddin Khilji added the entrance of the Qutub Minar called Alai Darwaza. Okay, the dome of the arch was built on scientific lines. Okay, the buildings on the Tughlaq period were constructed by combining arch and dome. They were also used the cheaper and easily available grey color stones. And another thing is that Tughlaqabad, it was with its beautiful lake, was built during the period of Ghiyazuddin Tughlaq. He was the founder of Tughlaq dynasty. Okay, and going down we have Muhammad bin Tughlaq built the tomb of Ghiyazuddin Tughlaq in a high platform. The Kolta Fort in Delhi, the creation of Firoz Tughlaq. This can be asked. The Kotla Fort in Delhi was creation of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Lodi Garden was an example of architecture of the Lodis. Okay. Now, new musical instruments. Now, in the music and in the art, in the literature part, we have important person. He was Amir Khusro. Introduced many new ragas such as Gora, Sanam. He evolved a new style of light music called Qawwalis. Okay, all these things are attributed to Amir Khusro. Okay, blending Hindu and Iranian styles. Okay, and the Indian classical work Ranga Darpan was translated into Persian during the reign of Firoz Tughlaq. Pir Bodhan, a Sufi saint, was one of the great musicians of this period. Then Raja Man Singh was there of Gwalior, was a great lover of music. He encouraged the composition of great musical work called Man Kauthal. Okay. Then we have the literature. Delhi Sultans patronized learning and literature. Many of them had great love for Arabic and Persian literature. Okay. Besides theology and poetry, the writing of history was also encouraged. Some sultans had their own court historians. And when we go down, just remember the name of Minhaj al-Siraj. He was the person who told about Russia. I have mentioned it in previous chapter. you can look into it. It was because Russia was a woman, and she was at that time, woman being a leader was not considered accurate. So he made some comments about it. Just look into it. Minhaj al-Suraj wrote Tabat in Nazri, a general history of Muslim dynasties up to 1260. Okay, this is a portrait of Amir Khusro. Okay, Amir Khusro is a very important personality in comparing to the medieval India. Okay, now Amir Khusro was the famous Persian writer of this period. He wrote a number of poems. He experimented with several poetic forms and created a new style of Persian poetry called Sabak-i-Hind. Sabak-i-Hind. He was also the first person to write in Persian. This question was asked in the prelims. Okay. He also wrote some Hindi verses. Amir Khusro's Khazin al-Fatwa speaks about Alauddin's conquest. Amir Khusro's Khuzin al-Fatwa. Okay. His famous work Tughlaq Nama deals with Ghiyazuddin Tughlaq. Okay, it deals with Ghiyazuddin Tughlaq. Sanskrit and Persian functioned as a linked languages in the Delhi Sultanate, and Zia Naqshbandi was the first to translate Sanskrit stories into Persian. The book Tuttu Nama, or the Book of Parrot, became popular and translated into Turkish, later into many European languages. Famous, this is also another important thing. Okay, famous Raja Tarangini, written by Kalhana, belonged to the period of Zainul Abdin, the ruler of Kashmir. Okay, many Sanskrit works on the medicine and music were translated into Persian. See, when you read this chapter, always write all this thing down because it can be asked in the prelims. Okay, in Arabic, Al-Burni Kitab Al-Hind is the most famous work. Al-Burni was he was under Alauddin Khilji, and no, I think it was under Gori. Okay, regional languages were developed during this period. Chand Baradi was a famous Hindi poet of this period. Bengali, next one. Bengali literature had also developed, and Nusrat Shah patronized the translation of Mahabharata into Bengali. Okay, Bhakti cult led to the development of Gujarati and Marathi languages. Vijayanagara Empire patronized Telugu and Kannada literature. Okay, we have seen the formation of Vijayanagara Empire, other Deccan Sultanates, all in the previous chapter. You can look into it. And what all we have learned so far. Central government and local administration under the Delhi Sultanate that we learned. Economic life of the people of India under the Delhi Sultanate. We have looked at the social condition and the impact of Muslim rule on Indian society. Then architectural contributions of the Delhi Sultanate, we have learned it. Persian and other scholars, especially look into Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro is really important during the Delhi Sultanate and their combination. So I hope you people liked our class today, and I am actually taking these videos because as a revision process for me also, and so it can help you guys also in your UPSC journey. I hope this today's class was productive. God bless you. Jai Hind.